The stars stretched endless and cold outside the windows of the research vessel Odyssey. For months the crew had drifted through empty systems, mapping ruins of forgotten civilizations and gathering fragments of history. To most of them it was routine work, tedious, slow, and without reward. But for Ethan Rains, a young human scientist with restless eyes, every discovery carried the promise of changing the future. On the edge of the Vaynar expanse, they found it. A broken world. The planet below was scarred, its surface cracked like shattered glass. Cities lay in ruins, silent and lifeless, their towers crumbled into jagged stumps. The scanners reported no population, no life signs. Only the echo of a great people who had lived there long ago. The ship descended into orbit and the landing party prepared. Ethan joined them, his heart racing. He had studied old archives of the Aelari, a species once whispered about as visionaries of art and wisdom. But history said they were gone. Completely. Extinct. The team entered the ruins with flashlights cutting through the dust. The buildings were vast, built from pale stone that shimmered faintly under their light. Carvings marked the walls, telling stories Ethan could only half understand. They spoke of unity, of songs that once filled their cities. The silence that lingered now felt unbearable. Then they heard it, a faint, broken sound. It was not wind. It was not machinery. It was a voice. Ethan froze, staring into the darkness ahead. The team raised their weapons cautiously, scanning the shadows. From behind a fallen arch, a figure emerged. Frail, trembling, but alive. Her skin glowed faintly like moonlight, and her silver eyes locked onto them with both fear and hope. She was no ghost. She was alive. "Impossible," whispered one of the crew. "The Aelari are gone." But Ethan stepped forward slowly, lowering his weapon. His voice was calm, steady. "No. Not all of them." The woman collapsed, weak from exhaustion. Ethan caught her gently before she hit the ground. Her breathing was shallow, but steady. Against all knowledge, against all records, she was proof that the Aelari had not fully vanished. They carried her back to the Odyssey. The crew buzzed with shock and confusion. Some feared what it meant, others worried about danger. But Ethan could not look away from her. He had spent his life chasing ancient mysteries, and now one rested in his arms. In the medical bay, the woman regained consciousness. Her voice was soft, musical, though her words carried sorrow. "My name is Leora. I am the last. My people are gone." Ethan sat beside her, listening carefully. Through halting breaths, she told them fragments of her story. The Aelari had been a flourishing race of philosophers and builders, but another empire, jealous and ruthless, waged war upon them. One by one their colonies fell, their worlds destroyed. Leora had survived by chance, hidden deep in a stasis chamber beneath the ruins. When she awoke, centuries had passed, and there was no one left to call her name. Ethan felt the weight of her words press on him like stone. Entire species had vanished in history, but hearing it from the lips of the last survivor made it unbearably real. She was not a record in a book. She was living grief, sitting before him. Still, his mind was not only heavy with sorrow. He had questions, urgent ones. During her medical scans, the ship's systems had reported something unexpected. Human and Aelari DNA carried strange similarities. Against all odds, Leora's biology was not hostile to human physiology. It was compatible. Ethan stared at the results in disbelief. It meant something unthinkable. Leora was not as alien as she seemed, and he was a possible link to her survival. The captain of the Odyssey called a meeting. The discovery of Leora could shake entire governments. Some argued she should be hidden, kept safe. Others said she might bring danger if her existence was revealed. But Ethan argued differently. We cannot leave her behind. She is living history. She is proof of what was lost and maybe what can still be saved. Leora listened in silence, her silver eyes fixed on Ethan. She sensed something different about him. While others saw her as a relic or a problem, Ethan saw her as a person. That small difference gave her strength to trust him. The decision was made. They would take her back to human space. But danger stirred beyond their view. Unknown to them, alien scavengers who haunted the ruins had caught traces of the Odyssey. To such hunters, a living Alari was priceless, worth more than any treasure in the galaxy. They would not let this opportunity slip away. Later, in the quiet of the Medicl bay, Ethan spoke to Leora alone. "Your people may be gone," he said softly, "but that doesn't mean you are finished. You survived for a reason." Her eyes filled with tears, though her voice was steady. And what reason could that be? Ethan hesitated, then showed her the genetic scans. "Because you and I are connected in ways no one expected. Humanity and Alari are not strangers after all." For a moment, silence hung between them. Leora looked at him with disbelief, then wonder, then something more difficult: fear. To her, he was hope, but also a reminder of what she stood to lose again. Still, as the Odyssey rose from the ruined world and the stars opened before them, one truth was certain: Leora was not alone anymore, and Ethan felt the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders. He did not yet know what it meant to be the only compatible link to a dying race, but deep inside he felt it would change everything. The discovery had been made. The journey had only just begun. The Odyssey traveled through the dark lanes of space, its engines humming like a quiet heartbeat. Inside, life returned to routine, but for Ethan Raines, nothing felt ordinary anymore. Every moment since the discovery of Leora carried a strange weight, as if history itself walked beside him. Leora remained in the Medicl bay at first, weak from years of stasis. Her body needed time to adjust, and her mind carried the heavy shadow of loss. Ethan spent long hours with her, learning her language, teaching her fragments of human speech. Bit by bit, walls between them began to lower. At first, their conversations were simple. She asked about the ship, about the stars beyond her ruined world. He told her about Earth, about its oceans and mountains, about music that filled crowded cities. In turn, she spoke softly of her people, the Alari, who once believed memory was the highest form of art. They stored songs not only in voices but in crystal archives that shimmered like fire. She described halls where thousands once gathered, where the sound of a single note could echo through an entire city. Ethan listened with fascination. Humans. We don't keep memories like that. We write books, paint, make recordings, but it's not the same as what you describe. We lose so much to time. Her silver eyes softened. That is why my people are gone. We thought memory alone would protect us, but memory cannot stop war. The sadness in her voice pierced Ethan's heart. He wanted to give her comfort, but words often felt too small. Still, he sat beside her, letting silence itself be an answer. Somehow she seemed to value that more than speeches. As days passed, medical scans continued. One evening, Dr. Harrow, the ship's physician, pulled Ethan aside with concern. "These results, they're unusual. Leora's DNA shares more with us than with any other species we've recorded. And you specifically, you're the closest genetic match we've seen." Ethan frowned. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" Harrow nodded. "If her people are to survive in any form, the link may be through you. I don't mean immediately, I mean in time. But she'll need to know." The thought weighed on Ethan all night. It was not just science, it was destiny pressing against his chest. Could one man carry the hope of an entire race? He didn't know. But he knew one thing. He had to be honest with Leora. The next morning, he found her sitting by the observation window. She gazed at the stars with a distant expression, as though searching for ghosts among them. He sat down quietly, and for a moment they simply watched the cosmos drift by. "There's something you should know," Ethan said finally. He explained the scans, the compatibility, the strange link between their species. Leora listened without interruption, her face unreadable. When he finished, silence filled the room like heavy air. At last, she spoke. "So, I am not as alone As I believed. Ethan hesitated. Not alone, but it also means responsibility. If my people learn what this means, they will want to act quickly. Some will see you as a treasure, others as a weapon. Her eyes narrowed. And what do you see? He looked at her directly. A person, not an experiment, not a symbol, just you. For the first time, she smiled. It was small, faint, but real. That single smile lit more warmth in Ethan than any star outside. Trust grew slowly, but it grew. Ethan introduced her to more of the crew, though many remained cautious. Some whispered that bringing her aboard was dangerous, that enemies would come searching. Others simply feared the unknown. But Ethan stood beside her, patient and steady. In return, Leora began sharing fragments of Aelari knowledge. She showed Ethan symbols etched into crystal fragments she had carried from her ruined city. When touched, they shimmered with faint light, projecting faint memories into the air. Scenes of her people dancing, singing, laughing. For a moment, the Odyssey's cold walls seemed alive with echoes of a lost world. The crew who witnessed it stood in silence, moved in ways they could not describe. Even the captain admitted, if this is what we can preserve, then maybe bringing her was the right choice. But their fragile peace was not to last. On the third week of travel, sensors picked up faint traces of pursuit. Unidentified ships shadowed them across the expanse, always distant but never gone. Ethan suspected the scavengers from the ruins had found them. The crew tightened security and tension filled the halls. One night, Leora approached Ethan in quiet urgency. They will not stop. I know the kind. They believe I am valuable. They will hunt me across every star. Ethan met her gaze firmly. Then they'll have to go through me first. Her voice trembled. Why? You owe me nothing. Because, he answered, humans don't walk away when someone needs help. Not if we can stand. The words seemed to strike something deep inside her. She touched her crystal pendant gently as though weighing his promise. For the first time, she felt not only protected but believed in. As days stretched into weeks, Ethan and Leora's bond deepened. They spoke of hope, of fear, of futures both impossible and fragile. She taught him an Aelari phrase, Ver Allen. It meant shared breath, the idea that two lives could carry one spirit. He repeated it clumsily, earning a soft laugh from her. Your voice bends the words, but the meaning still lives. When she laughed, even for a heartbeat, Ethan felt the shadow of extinction lift. By the time the Odyssey neared the safe lanes of human space, their connection was no longer fragile curiosity. It was strength. Leora was no longer a ghost of her people, and Ethan was no longer just a scientist chasing history. They were bound by something rare, the meeting of two worlds at the edge of loss. But the hunters still followed. And both of them knew that before safety could be reached, a storm would come. The warning came during the quiet hours of the night cycle. The Odyssey's sensors lit up with faint signatures, ships in the distance, moving without transponders, following the same vector as them. At first, the captain hoped they were traders or patrols. But the pattern was too deliberate. These ships did not approach directly. They lingered just outside clear range, never too close, never too far. They're tracking us, Ethan said as he studied the screen. His voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp. Same pattern as scavenger raiders. They know what we're carrying. The crew fell into tense silence. Everyone understood what we're carrying meant. Leora. For days, the pursuit continued. No matter how fast the Odyssey jumped between systems, the shadow ships followed. Leora felt the weight of every moment. She had warned them. The scavengers would never stop. To them, she was not a person. She was profit, power, and leverage. She watched the crew working tirelessly, setting decoys, scrambling signals, rerouting power. Their loyalty to Ethan gave her a strange comfort. Even though many of them feared her presence, they did not abandon her. Humans, she realized, were creatures of stubbornness. They clung to each other even when survival seemed uncertain. Ethan spent long hours with her in the observation bay. He wanted her to remain calm, though he carried his own storm inside. "They're closing in," he admitted one night. "Sooner or later we'll have to face them." Leora's silver eyes reflected the stars. "You should let me go. If they only want me, then your people will be safe." "No," Ethan said firmly. "That's not who we are. We don't leave people behind." She studied him for a long time, then whispered, "Humans are strange. My people would have hidden me away to protect themselves. But you?" She shook her head softly. "You choose to fight." "Maybe that's why we survive," Ethan replied. "We don't always choose the safest path. We choose the one that matters." The scavenger ships made their first strike, in the Adiron Belt. The Odyssey slipped past fields of drifting rock only to be ambushed by two raider craft firing ion bursts. Alarms blared. The ship shuddered under impact. The crew scrambled to battle stations. Ethan stayed by Leora's side until the captain ordered him to engineering, where his quick thinking could help reroute power to shields. The fight was brutal. The Odyssey was not a warship, but humans had never relied on strength alone. They used speed, cunning, and sheer stubborn will. The crew released drone decoys into the belt, creating a web of false signatures. The raiders fired blindly, striking only rocks. With clever maneuvering, the Odyssey slipped behind the largest asteroid, vanishing into its shadow. The scavengers swept past, convinced their prey had fled. For the moment, they were safe. But Ethan knew this was only the beginning. Later, when the ship was quiet again, Leora came to him. She touched his arm lightly, her expression soft with worry. "You fight like cornered animals," she said. "Fierce, desperate. It is both frightening and beautiful." Ethan gave a tired laugh. "That's humanity. We're at our best when the odds are against us." Her voice dropped lower. "I fear what will happen when they catch us. You cannot fight forever." Instead of answering, Ethan looked at her crystal pendant. "What about you? Your people had knowledge we can't imagine. Can you give us something to help?" Leora hesitated, then nodded slowly. She reached for the pendant, pressing it to her chest. The crystal shimmered, and suddenly, light filled the room. Images unfolded around them, blueprints, fragments of ancient design. "This is the memory of the last defense," she explained. "A weapon my people used only in the darkest hour. I had hoped never to show it. But now, perhaps it can save us." Ethan stared at the holographic patterns with awe. The technology was complex, yet parts of it echoed human systems. It was not impossible. If they could merge her knowledge with the Odyssey's engineering, they might create something unexpected. "Leora," he said softly, "this could give us a chance." Her gaze was firm. "Then we build it together." The next days were filled with work. Ethan and Leora spent hours in engineering, blending human machinery with alien memory. The crew watched in quiet amazement as the fragile Aelari survivor moved among them, offering insight that seemed both ancient and alive. Through the work, Ethan felt their bond deepen further. When she grew weary, he supported her. When he struggled, with her symbols she guided him patiently. Together they created a device, small but powerful, a pulse emitter that could disrupt enemy systems based on Aelari principles of harmonic resonance. When they tested it on a captured drone, the machine froze instantly, its circuits silenced without damage. The crew cheered. For the first time, since the pursuit began, they had hope, but hope often brings the final trial. The scavenger fleet revealed itself in full near the edge of the Colleen Rift. No longer hiding, 6 ships descended on the Odyssey. Their voices cut through comms, sharp and greedy. "Surrender the survivor of the Aelari. Do this and your deaths will be quick." The crew held their breath. Leora looked at Ethan, fear and defiance in her eyes. "What will you do?" she asked. Ethan's jaw tightened. "We'll fight, but this time with your gift." The captain gave the order. The Odyssey charged forward, weaving between enemy fire. Ethan activated the pulse emitter. A shockwave rippled outward, invisible but devastating. 2 scavenger ships went dark instantly, drifting powerless. The crew roared in triumph. The remaining ships faltered, uncertain. For a moment, the impossible seemed within reach, but the battle was far from over. The scavengers regrouped, circling like predators. The Odyssey was damaged, its shields fading. Ethan gripped the controls of the emitter, sweat running down his brow. Beside him, Leora placed her hand over his. "Together," she whispered, and together they prepared for the storm that would decide not only their fate, but the survival of her legacy. The scavenger fleet closed in, 6 dark ships surrounding the Odyssey. Their hulls gleamed with sharp angles, weapons glowing like hungry eyes. The humans had crippled 2 of them with Leora's pulse device, but 4 still remained, stronger and angrier than before. In the command deck, alarms echoed through every corner. The captain's voice was steady but firm. "We can't outrun them anymore. This is where we make our stand." Ethan stood near the control station, his hands clenched tight. Beside him, Leora's silver eyes burned with determination. She had once been the last shadow of a lost people. Now she was fighting not just for herself, but for those who had taken her in. The crew moved quickly, preparing the ship for battle. Shields flickered weakly, patched together by long hours of repair. Weapons were limited, but humanity's strength had never been in firepower. It was in creativity, in the will to survive against impossible odds. Ethan spoke up. "We can use the asteroids in the rift. Their magnetic fields will mess with enemy sensors. If we draw them inside, we might even the fight." The captain nodded. "Then that's our battlefield." The Odyssey dived into the Colleen Rift, a maze of floating rock and glowing storms of static energy. The scavenger ships followed eagerly, confident their numbers would crush the humans. Inside the rift, the battle began. The Odyssey darted between asteroids, weaving through narrow gaps that larger ships struggled to follow. Human pilots knew, risk better than anyone, and they danced through danger with daring speed. Enemy fire lit up the void, crashing against rock and dust. Ethan and Leora worked side by side at the pulse emitter. Each time it fired, an enemy ship's systems flickered, buying the crew precious moments. But the emitter strained under repeated use, its circuits overheating. Sparks flew, and warning, lights screamed. "It won't last much longer," Ethan warned. Leora touched the device gently, as if calming a living thing. "Then we use it when it matters most." Her calm voice steadied him, even in the chaos. The scavengers adapted quickly. One ship cornered the Odyssey, cutting off escape. Another rained fire on their shields, tearing away layers of protection. The crew groaned under the pressure. A single mistake could end them. Then Ethan had an idea. He turned to the captain. "We need to split their attention. If we make them chase false targets, we can turn the rift itself into our weapon." The captain raised an eyebrow. "False targets? With what?" Ethan grinned. "With Ilari memory." Together he and Leora used her crystal fragments to project illusions into the rift. Shimmering images of the Odyssey appeared between asteroids, ghost ships, each moving in different directions. The scavengers fired wildly, chasing shadows. The crew cheered as 2 enemy ships collided with rocks, fooled by the illusions. The rift became a storm of confusion, where reality and memory twisted together. Leora's face was pale with effort, but her spirit glowed bright. "My people made memories to preserve beauty. Today those memories will preserve life." Ethan looked at her with awe. "You're saving us, Leora, not just with knowledge, but with who you are." The battle raged on. One scavenger ship remained dangerously close, locking onto the real Odyssey. Its weapons charged for a killing strike. The crew braced for impact. "Now," Ethan shouted. He and Leora activated the pulse emitter one final time. The device shrieked, pouring every ounce of power into a single blast. A wave of resonance tore through the rift. The scavenger ship shuddered, its lights dying, its weapons silenced. The emitter cracked apart, burning out completely, but it had done its job. The last scavenger vessels, realizing their advantage was gone, hesitated. For scavengers, profit was everything. A battle without reward was not worth dying for. Slowly, they turned and fled into the darkness, leaving the Odyssey battered but alive. Silence fell across the command deck. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, the crew erupted in cheers. Against impossible odds, they had survived. Ethan slumped back, exhausted but smiling. Leora leaned against him, her body trembling from the strain of using her memories as weapons. Yet in her eyes there was no sorrow, only pride. "You fought like Alari," she whispered. "No," Ethan said softly. "We fought like humans, but together, we were stronger than either alone." The victory was not without cost. The ship was damaged, supplies were low, and many feared the scavengers would return with reinforcements. But the crew carried new confidence. They had faced death and lived. Later, as the Odyssey drifted safely beyond the rift, Ethan and Leora stood alone in the observation bay. Stars stretched endless before them, untouched and waiting. "You see now," Ethan said quietly, "why humans fight even when the odds are hopeless. We don't fight for glory. We fight for each other." Leora turned to him, her voice soft but steady. "My people could not understand that. We thought harmony meant avoiding conflict, but harmony without defense is only silence waiting to fall." She looked out at the stars, her eyes filled with new light. "Perhaps the Alari are not gone. Perhaps they live on in what I have found here." Ethan met her gaze, knowing what she meant. Their bond was more than survival now. It was the beginning of something greater, a bridge between two species, a legacy neither side could create alone. When the captain entered, he found them standing together. His voice was firm but kind. "We've bought ourselves time, but when word of this spreads, governments, corporations, and hunters alike will come for her. This fight isn't over." Ethan nodded. "Then we'll be ready. Humanity has faced worse. We'll face this too." Leora's voice carried quiet strength. "And I will not run again. I will stand with you." The captain studied them both, then gave a rare smile. "Then perhaps we have already won." As the Odyssey sailed back toward human space, the crew repaired what they could. But in the hearts of all aboard, something new had been born. They had seen what humans could achieve when pushed to their limits and what could happen when the last hope of another species stood beside them. The battle had proven more than survival. It had proven humanity's place in the stars, not as scavengers, not as conquerors, but as protectors, builders, and allies. For Leora, it was no longer a question of extinction. For Ethan, it was no longer a question of chance. The Odyssey limped into human space weeks later, scarred but still alive. Its hull bore marks of battle, and its engines carried the weary groan of survival. Yet inside the ship, the crew held, their heads high. They had faced death in the rift and returned with something far more valuable than treasure. They had returned with Leora, the last of the Alari. News of her presence spread quickly. Before the Odyssey even reached port, encrypted transmissions carried whispers across the colonies. Some called her a miracle, others called her a danger, and some saw her as an opportunity too great to ignore. Ethan knew the storm was coming. He saw it in the faces of officials who greeted them at the docking station. They wore polite smiles, but their eyes glittered with hunger. Humanity's leaders wanted answers. Answers only Leora could give. Leora stepped onto human soil for the first time with quiet grace. Crowds gathered behind barriers, staring at her with awe. Cameras flashed, voices shouted, but she remained calm. Her silver eyes scanned the people, and for a moment Ethan saw a flicker of hope in her expression. "These are your people," she whispered to him. He nodded. "And now they're yours too." But behind the hope, fear stirred. Councils and corporations sent invitations, demands, even threats. They wanted her knowledge, her genetics, her memory crystals. Some wanted to protect her, others to control her. One evening, The council summoned Ethan and Leora to a grand chamber on the central station. Leaders of many colonies sat in a circle, their faces lit by cold light. The air carried tension as sharp as a blade. A woman in a dark suit spoke first. "We recognize the importance of this discovery, but we must ask, what is the purpose of bringing her here? Is she a relic to be preserved? A scientist to be studied? Or something else entirely?" Ethan stood tall, his voice steady. "She is not an object. She is a person. She is the last of her people, and she deserves a future, not a cage." Murmurs filled the chamber. Some nodded, in agreement. Others frowned. Another counselor leaned forward. "And what of her species? The scans prove she is compatible with us. This could mean the rebirth of the Aelari, through union with humanity. Do you intend to carry that responsibility?" All eyes turned to Ethan. He felt the weight of the galaxy pressing on him. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he looked at Leora. She met his gaze calmly. "The choice is not his alone. It is mine as well." Her voice was clear, steady, and filled with quiet strength. "I will not be a weapon. I will not be a possession. My people's legacy does not rest in control or fear. It rests in the bond we now share. Humanity and Aelari can walk forward together, not as master and subject, but as partners." The chamber fell silent. Her words carried a truth no law could deny. That night, Ethan and Leora returned to the Odyssey. The crew welcomed them, offering smiles, food, and laughter. For a little while, the shadow of politics faded. They were a family, bound by what they had endured together. Later, Ethan and Leora stood in the observation bay once again, looking out at the stars. The galaxy seemed endless yet less lonely than before. "You spoke with such strength today," Ethan said softly. "You gave them hope." She shook her head gently. "No. I reminded them of what they already carry. Your people have always been stronger together. That is why you survived when others fell." Ethan studied her for a moment. "And you? Do you believe your people can live again? Through us?" Her hand touched her crystal pendant. "The Aelari are not gone if their spirit continues. If memory is carried forward in new life, then we are not lost. You are not only compatible in body, Ethan. You are compatible in heart." Her words struck deep. He realized then that their bond was no longer just about survival. It was about building something greater than either of them alone. But the challenges were far from over. Not all humans agreed with the Council's decision to let Leora remain free. Whispers of secret plots reached the Odyssey. Some feared that Aelari knowledge would unbalance power among the colonies. Others wanted to seize her for their own ambitions. Ethan gathered the crew. "If they come for her, they'll have to go through us. We fought once in the rift. We'll fight again if we must." The crew agreed without hesitation. They had already risked everything for her once. They would do it again. Leora's eyes filled with quiet tears. "You fight for me, though you owe me nothing." The captain shook his head. "That's where you're wrong. We owe you everything. You showed us that even in the darkest moment, there is light worth fighting for." In the months that followed, the Rebirth Project began. It was not forced by governments or driven by greed. It was a choice, made by Leora and Ethan together. Scientists and philosophers worked with them, not to control, but to understand. The project's goal was simple: to preserve the essence of the Aelari within the human future, to create hybrids who carried both resilience and memory, strength and harmony. Some opposed it, but more supported it as stories of the Odysseys. Stands spread across the colonies. People began to see Leora not as an alien relic, but as a symbol of what humanity could be. A species that did not destroy the past, but wove it into the future. One evening, as the first results of the project showed promise, Ethan and Leora returned once more to the window of the stars. "You've changed us," Ethan said quietly. "You've changed me." Leora smiled, her eyes glowing softly in the starlight. And you have given me more than survival. You have given me belonging. They stood together in silence, watching the endless horizon. The galaxy stretched wide, filled with dangers and wonders. But for the first time in centuries, Leora felt no fear. She was not the last anymore. She was the first of something new, and humanity, once seen as just another rising race, had proven itself again. Not through conquest, not through power, but through connection, courage, and heart. The legacy of the Aolari lived on, and the story of humanity had only just begun.